But we really want to get this out to other farmers to see what our farmers are doing, how they're doing it, what it means from a financial point of view. Are the measures that they're implementing on their farms, is it working, and is it leading into extra money in their pockets? So there's a huge amount of information on these farms.
Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc Beef podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan and this is a bonus episode this week, which is a recording of the Teagasc National Beef Conference with Future Beef Programme Manager Martina Harrington. Martina discusses the innovations on future beef suckler farms which are driving sustainability.
So the programme consists of 22 suckler beef farmers. They're spread right throughout the countryside, from over here, Trevor Boland over in Sligo, down to John Pringle down in Wicklow. And these farmers were all selected as they were very typical of the area in which they are. So that's from a farm size, from a farming system, from land type, and obviously from climatic conditions. And the idea behind that is when we were working with these farmers and they were adopting technology on their farm, it was farmers that surrounded those farmers that would be able to look at it and say, well, listen, if Ed Curtin or Eamon McCarthy or Olivia Hines are adopting these technologies, well, I'm well capable of adopting the very same technologies on my farm. And the other big thing, I suppose, that I want to mention with these farmers is when we were selecting them, the farmers, we always look for farmers that were really positive, that were really open, and that were willing to share their experiences, good and bad, with the broader community. So I'd like to thank the farmers for being a part of the programme, and I'd like to thank them for their enthusiasm in which they've worked with in the last 3 years. They are really a joy to work with. We've been funded by the 10 meat processors, which is hugely important to us because 90% of our beef is being exported outside of Ireland. And for us to be hitting those high price markets, we really do have to be selling an excellent product. So when we're working with the factories, we're able to see exactly what they're looking for. And then when they're working with us, they're able to see exactly what our farmers are doing to improve the quality of the product that they're producing and to reduce down their environmental impact on the environment so that we're able to sell this beef abroad. There's three advisors working in the programme: myself, Aisling Malloy, who covers the north half of the country, and James Milan, who's covering the south half of the country. We did have Gabriel Trayers on our programme, but he has moved on. He's regional manager now in the Roscommon Longford area. And we also work very closely with the local advisors in the offices, who are the advisors to these farmers and have been the advisors to these farmers for the last 10 and 15 years. And we want to thank them too, most sincerely, for working with us in the programme and bringing these farmers to our attention to be a part of the programme. So what are the objectives of the programme? We're looking at creating more profitable and more sustainable farms. And the word sustainable is used a lot, but if we look at our farmers, if they're not profitable, they're not viable, and they're not going to stay in the business. So profitability is key. And then we want to look at what effect are our farms having on the environment and how can we reduce down that effect. So we're talking about greenhouse gases, we're talking about ammonia reduction, and we're also talking about improving water quality, improving biodiversity on these farms, and then to demonstrate, to get all of these technologies that we're using on our farm out to the broader public. So if we look at it here from a very simple point of view, we're looking at our gross margins have increased on these farms, €160, and we have reduced down the carbon footprint over the 3 years of the programme by 8.64%. And that looks like it's small when we're looking at a target of 25%, but it is quite significant in the technologies that what we've used on farms. And our focus is on increasing the output on these farms, so the kilos of beef that are being sold, while reducing down the inputs on the farm. And it just so happens that if we're trying to do that, that's improving the profitability of the farm, but it also reduces down the carbon footprint on these farms. And we'll see as we go along in the presentation how this is working. So I suppose from a profitability side of things, when we look at it, it's your output. So it's your kilos of beef that you're selling off of your farm and the value of that beef, whether that be live animals or whether it be carcass that you're selling off of your farm. So we want that to be always We want that to be always increasing on our farms. And then if we're looking at our profitability, we have to take away the costs of that production. So if you're looking at main costs on farms, you're talking about concentrate, you're talking about fertilizer, and you're talking about your contractor. You have all of your other costs in there, but they're the three main ones. And we're looking at how we can decrease the cost of those and increase those level of inputs on our farms. And then your plus or minus your inventory. And that is going to drive up your profitability on your farm while also reducing down your carbon footprint. So if we look at these two farms, and just to give a demonstration, we have John Dunn, he's in Port Arlington there in County Laois, and if we see his gross output on his farm, it's very, very high, at 2,567. So he's has that output there on his farm to take away all of his costs. So the variable costs on his farm is 1,043. So that's leaving him with a 1,522 euro gross margin. And if we come down here to Michael Biggins, we're looking at his gross output is not as high. He's a weanling and a store producer, so his output isn't as high as where we are with John Dunn's, but he's taken really good control of his variable costs. They're only there at 37% through, maximizing his grassland production. A lot of the stuff that he's doing on his farm, he's doing himself. He's reducing them contractors, and he's left still with a very good gross margin of 1,882. So we'll see how that's done as we move through the presentation. So again, focus, increase output, and reduce costs on the farm. So how are our farmers achieving that? And the first thing that they're doing is they're breeding the right cow. So we're not into colour or creed. We're really looking at, what are the traits that we need to look at a balanced cow. So we're looking at our carcass weight of these cows plus 21 kilos, because after all we are selling beef. We're looking at the milk on these farms plus 5.5. We like to see that up around 8, and this is Wesley Brown's cows because we want to produce this type of a weanling here. So we want to have good milk in those cows, but those cows also have to be fertile. So it really is a marriage between all three to make sure that we're producing this good quality weanling that has a high value and that is increasing the output on our farms. So how are we doing that on farm? So we're basically looking at what are the genetics there. And if we have an animal that is a little bit weak on, say, milk, or it's a little bit weak on carcass weight, we're looking at either bulls or AI to try and increase that trait within the breed of the animal. So if we're looking for milk, we might use something like a Simmental. If we're trying to, reduce down the size of the cow, we might look like something like an Angus. Or if we're looking at on farms, for a lot of our farms, you might have maybe 20, 30 cows, and you don't have room maybe to have two bulls on the farm. So we're looking at AI, and some farmers are 100% AI on farms. And if we're looking at that, that really is around to maximize AI on farm. It's really around your heat detection. So we have farmers that are using heat detection aids, such as the Moo call a Sense Hub. You're looking at very simple systems such as tail paint, your scratch cards, or we're looking at a chin ball on a vasectomized bull here on Olivia Hines's. So heat detection is key. Other part in that is handling. Like, we're a lot of our farmers, 50% of them are part-time farmers, so they don't have a huge amount of time. So you're looking at maybe trying to minimize the amount of time that men are handling and women are handling animals. So this is a very simple system here on Michael Biggins's. He has 3 outblocks on his farm, and he's 3 very simple handling units on the farm that he can just run in his cows. He can AI them there on the same block, or if he has to do any level of dosing or a sick animal or whatever else, he has those systems in place. And the other technologies that have been used in the farms in the last couple of years is synchronization programs. So it's basically removing that, where you're looking at your cows every day, and there's 3 movements with your synchronization program and fixed time AI. So you're bringing your animals the first day, they're injected, you bring them back in on day 6, they're injected, and then you're doing 2 services on those animals. So the animals are coming in 3 and a maximum of 4 times. Another technology that the farmers have introduced in the last couple of years is sex semen. And it has had mixed results, I suppose, because it is a different technology. It does need a little bit of extra timing on, or more careful timing on farms. So it has had good results in some situations and poor results in the other. And that's what you can learn from these farmers that are within the program. So the holy grail on any suckler beef farm is to have that calf per cow per year. We want every cow going out to grass with a calf with her, and that includes your heifers, and we want those calving down at 2 years of age. And that again is at pushing the output on these farms. So that cow, rather than hanging around for another year to calve at 3 years of age, is producing a calf there every year. So that's increasing the output on your farm. And the other side of your cows is your bull. You have to have a good fertile bull on the farm if that's what you're using. And that bull has to have an appropriate calving difficulty if you're using them on a mature cow or if you're using them on a heifer. So what we're saying on our heifers that are calving down for the first time is really look at the calving difficulty of that bull. You want a live heifer and you want a live calf after calving down at 2 years of age. So if you're looking at calving difficulty, we're looking at less than 7% on calving difficulty for the heifers is what our farmers are using within the program. Farmers are body condition scoring, so they're making sure that their cows are fit and that they're not fat when they're calving down. And that's all around making sure that they have an easy calving, but they also go back in calf. So if we look at our farmers, the body condition score, and then if anything needs to be corrected, they're doing that through nutrition early on. And this is Rory Cummins with a pen of his animals. He pens his in-calf heifers in one pen. They're fed separately. He feeds pens any cows that may be a little bit fat into a separate pen that they're restricted and their body condition score comes back down, and anything that's in the correct body condition score is left as is. And then, of course, is minerals, like you're feeding minerals along there to the cows to make sure that the cows are able to calve down, but you also have a good a virile calf when it's born. And then we move on to the health and hygiene. We've worked with all of these farmers and looked and seen if there's any issues on their farms. And if there are, then they're going and they're vaccinating. John Dunn is here, he's vaccinating for Rota and Corona and IBR on his farm. We're ensuring that those vaccinations are going in when they're supposed to be going in. So if you're looking at Rota Corona, 3 to 12 weeks before the calf, and then that IBR is going in a month beforehand. And then these calves are calving into a good clean shed. So you're minimizing the chance of getting any levels of scours or pneumonia, and as soon as possible then that they're heading to grass. So if we look at how our farms have performed since they joined the program, these were already very, very good farms. They have reduced down their calving interval on their farm. They've reduced down the mortality on farm. And the big one here is they've increased their calves per cow per year from 0.91 to 0.96, which is all feeding into the profitability on farm while also reducing down the carbon footprint per kilo of beef. And we're calving 74% of our heifers at 2 years of age. So our farmers are testament to the fact that you can calve down your heifers at 2 years of age as long as you're minding them and that you're abiding by all of the rules of making sure that they're a good weight for age at bulling, etc., etc. So then if we move on to the next step, we have our calf on the ground, and then we want that calf to be performing at its maximum, so a maximum average daily gain on that animal, and that's going to really come from the milk from the cow. So that's why you're trying to have that 8+ as regards kilos of milk in your cow, and that the calf's or the cow's grassland management. So if we look at how our farmers are performing, on average in 2024, we had males performing at 1.15 kilos per head per day up to a 200-day weight of 286. Now the target is 300, and this would have been back on previous years because we've had a difficult year this year as regards performance. Our females were doing 1.1, giving us a 200-day weight of 263. So that's slightly ahead of target of the 250. But if we look at the range, which is very interesting in these farms, we're ranging from 0.93 up to 1.34, which gives us a range and a 200-day weight on males of 239 to 330 kilos. And if we look at that, that's an 86 kilo difference in the weight of one animal versus another, which is a 258 euros difference in the value of that animal if we're going to put a value of 3 euros a kilo. So when we're looking at the farmers down here and when they're looking at their own reports versus the farmers that are up here, they're looking at where are their cows, what are we a shortage on carcass, are we a shortage on milk, or maybe there's something around grassland management or health. So that's what we're focusing in on to see, can we move these farmers up to this side of the scale? So then we have the cow has done her job. She's after rearing her calf, and it's moving across now on to the farmers. So the first step where the farmer is taking over is getting these animals weaned. So we're talking our farmers are forward creep grazing. This is a very simple system that's set up in Angus Fatty, two horse poles. The calves come out through the under the wire. The cows aren't able. They come out and eat their little bit of meal here, and they're able to forward creep grass most of the year long. And similar system set up on Michael Biggins's. And then we're into feeding meal. So meal is fed as per the National Beef Welfare Scheme. You have 4 weeks where animals are getting a kilo of meal a day, and then after they're weaned, they're up on to 2 kilos a day. So what we do is we start off with a creep feeder. Animals go into that to get used to the meal, and then we're going into the trucks. So that makes sure that every animal is getting a fair shot at eating meal rather than what's in the creep feeder. It's the biggest lad that's in first is going to eat the most. Then we're looking at health on these farms, ensuring that there's proper vaccination protocol on the farm as per their vet's instructions. So whatever problems are on farm, that they're being sorted with an applied vaccination program. And then animals are being dosed on the farm as per fecal sample. And so we're going out, we're taking samples from these animals to see is there an issue with, say, lungworm, or if is there an issue with stomach worms on the farm, and then those animals are dosed. If lungworm is an issue, you'll hear those animals coughing. And then again, with their vets, they're sitting down, they're looking at what dosing is working on their farm, and that's what they're using. And that's down to maximizing your performance after the weaning system. We're into a shed then and silage quality. So once we've managed our grassland, which we'll talk a little bit later, animals are going into the shed and they're going to be fed silage. And silage can make up for some farmers in the West, it could be 6 months of the feed on the farm. And different types of animals require different types of fodder. So we sit down with the farmers, we do a fodder budget, and that's the quantity. So that's hugely important, but also the quality. Like, so if we have suckler cows, we're into looking at a 66 DMD silage, which is fairly easy to manage. But if we're coming up here and looking at our weanlings and our finishing cattle, we want to have a 74 DMD silage so that those animals perform as a maximum. There's a lesser amount of meal to go in, and you have a better intake if you have better quality feed going into your animals. So if we're trying to get this here, we're really looking at, making sure that we're getting this silage cut before you head into a heading date. So we're kind of getting to around that middle of May to the 25th of May. You're looking at getting 74 or 76 DMD silage. That silage ground is grazed before it's cut so that we're not losing this 6-7% DMD with a dead butt, and that we're applying the right nutrients to that silage, that we're able to cut it on time and we don't have a level of nitrate that's delaying it and where we're leading into lodging. So how have the farmers been performing? So you can see here this is your 2023 results. We don't have all of the 2024 results in yet. We have a 73.4% DMD was what the average was for the quality of the first cut silages, which is excellent. And the average cutting date for these was the 27th of May. So you can see you need to have that May date to kind of get into that 73, 74 DMD silage. If we're looking at the bottom level of the silage, it's a 69 DMD, and you can see here that was cut on the 2nd of June. So from 22 into 23, the DMDs of the silages have increased by 3.6%. So that's equivalent to a kilo of ration per head per day to get performance on animals. So that's always very positive. Then we're looking at our grazing season. And again, I suppose if we look at a grazing season, a second season at grass, we want to maximize the length of that grazing season. And why is that? And that's basically down to grass is the cheapest form of feed that we're going to have on our farm. So if we take an example here of an animal being turned out on the 1st of March, 430 kilos, he's going to graze for 228 days, and we weigh him on the 15th of October. If we have really good, high quality grassland management where animals are going into good pastures and they're moving out of those fairly fast, we're going to see a performance of 1.0 kilos per head per day onto those animals, which is a gain of 228 kilos over that 220-day winter or 220-day grazing season. If we go back to where we have relatively poor grassland management, maybe animals are moving into, heavier swards, they're staying in there for a longer period of time, there might be an issue around around maybe a parasite burden, we're only looking at 0.8 kilos per head per day, which is only 182 kilos that's been gained on that animal over that summer. So there's a loss in performance there. There's a loss in revenue, 140 euros, but you're also looking at this animal having to go back into a shed, this animal here having to go back into a shed and be finished for a much longer period at a much higher cost than this animal here. So we really are aiming at going in at this lovely lush grass, 9, 10 centimeters, coming back out at 4 or 5 centimeters rather than coming into this type of grassland here. So how do you manage that, and how have we managed it on our farms? We've sat down with the farmers and we've done an autumn closing planner. So this time of the year, so that you can keep your cattle out for as long as possible, but you're making sure that you have grass there for the following spring. All of our farmers are on pasture base. So there's very simple systems there to go in and do those plans on the farm. We're looking at farmers that have had to improve infrastructure and are willing to make mistakes. And that goes back to what we said on the first slide. These farmers are all willing to go out and adopt new measures, and are willing to make the mistakes on their farms. And they don't see rehousing as a failure. They see it as a win, because they're after being able to go out and maybe graze for 3 or 4 weeks. And if they have to go back into the house, that's not the end of the world. They have the silage that they didn't have to feed in February or March that they can feed in April. And then if we're into our mid-season, you're really talking about, again, going back into that nice leafy paddock. We've had to increase paddocks on farms. We're grazing in 3 days. You're going in at 10 centimeters. We have our finishing stock is grazing down to 5.5 centimeters. We're not forcing our finishing stock to graze down to that 4 centimeters, because we have cows there, suckler cows, that can go in and graze out those paddocks. So if we look at measures that have been implemented on farms, here's a nice spur roadway that's coming out from John Barry's and Tipperary's shed, that he can bring out cows, or he can bring out his autumn calves that can go out and graze these paddocks. So we have Olivia Hines here, again, the same thing, a roadway down the middle of our paddocks. And this is James Skeeton. So he's very heavy land down in Clare. So if the paddock here is a little bit wet, he can go on past that paddock, go on, graze this one, and then come back to the one here when conditions are suitable. If we look at the mid-season, we're into, higher numbers of paddocks, and these can be created using temporary fencing. Like Olivia here, she has a sheep, so it's a little bit more of an arduous affair. You have 3 strands of temporary fencing going across here. You need to have lots of water trucks so that you're able to divide up your farms. And Ed Curtin is another nice, simple system that he's set up. He's a wire here. He can move it across to there, and he can move his animals either up or down his main roadway. And he can do that on his own. He's part-time, so he can run into, this is an outblock of land. He can run into that on the way home, get his animals moved 10 minutes, and he's finished. So I suppose the other key focus area on our farms have been soil fertility, and the reason behind that is our nitrogen use efficiencies. So what we want to see, and science tells us that if we're down here at a very low pH, P and K, for the amount of nitrogen we're putting out, we're only getting about 35% of the value. Whereas we move across on this arrow here and we optimize our pH, our P and K, we're getting much better value for the nitrogen that we're putting out on those farms. So how have we achieved an increase in soil fertility on farms? Well, first of all, we've gone out and we've tested all of the farms. So we've gone out and tested all of the fields. There have been 30, 40 samples done per farm. So they know exactly where the soil fertility is in each field. And then we've sat down and looked at it, and we've done a plan for these farmers. So the first thing that you're looking at is increasing the soil pH. So that's by putting out lime onto the farms. And it really is the best money that you're going to spend, because it's a soil conditioner, but it'll also help to release what other nutrients in the soil, especially P. So you can see where P indexes have increased on these farms throughout the 2 years on farm or 3 years in the program. We've tested the slurry. So like we're putting a value on this slurry. So if we put a value of 30 euros per 1,000 gallons, we wanted to know what's the value within that slurry. And then we need to put it out where it's needed. So silage ground more particularly, and also on ground that has low P's and K's. So we're using that trail and shoe to put out that slurry. So the use of the trail and shoe has gone from 37% up to 83% on the farms. But again, slurry is a very valuable resource, so we only want it going out onto farms when it's going to be taken up. So that's when your soil temperatures are up above that 6, 7 degrees and grass is actually growing. So 50% of the farmers within the program are building more storage so they can hold on to that slurry for longer and to make sure that it's going out when it's needed. And when we've all of these things done, then we look at how we're going to build those P's and K's using compounds like 18,612, not forgetting our sulfur, 13,620 and sulfur to build up the P's and K's. And then all the other requirements for nitrogen is covered by protected urea. And Patrick Forrestal has gone through the pros and cons of the protected urea. But the use on our farms has increased from 14 to 45%. And there's very favourable feedback on the use of protected urea, mainly from a workload point of view, that it's a 46% nitrogen percentage of nitrogen in the bag. So if I'm going out to spread 23 units and I'm spreading a 46 compound, I'm able to cover much greater area from a time point of view on my with that load of fertilizer, but also the price, it's about 20% cheaper than your can when you're putting it out in farm. And if we look at an actual result, this is Donica and Eamon McCarthy down in Waterford. If we look what has actually happened on their farms, when they started off in the programme, there was none of the farm that was optimum soil fertility. And after implementing the technologies that we said there, 50% or almost 50% of their farm now is up on optimum soil fertility. And what that has done for them is they've grew an extra 2.6 tons in dry matter of grass on their farm with no extra fertilizer in 2023. So that really is a win-win for them from a carbon footprint point of view, but also from a profitability point of view. So if we move on then to other technologies that have been adopted on our farms, in 2022 we had a great trip down to Salahead and we met James down there. And the farmers were really impressed with what was happening, like with the amount of grass that was grown with actually zero nitrogen on the farm. Very impressed there. And then we went to have visit Tim Marr. He's outside Rossgray. And he's a farmer again that is growing grass with no nitrogen input onto it. There is the P and K. So when the farmers went back, they had a look at their own farms, they had a look at where soil fertility was, where they could implement any of these measures. So whether it be the white clover on farm or whether it be red clover. We have farmers that have gone in and reseeded. We have farmers that have gone in and oversown on these plots. We have farmers that have gone in and looked at multi-species swards. And this is the red clover sward here on Ken Gills. So if we look at it now, we have 11 farmers within the programme that have sown red clover to provide the silage needs on their farm. And there's 35 hectares of that so far. So again, these farmers are a source of information for yourselves if you want to talk to them what they've done or how they've done. And a lot of people would say, well, listen, this red clover is only suited for the east of the country. But if we look at it here, we've got a really good spread, Roscommon and Clare over in the West Mayo, over to Wicklow and Meath, and all with very good and promising results from it. So our next part within the Future Brief program, we're looking at biodiversity and water quality. So we want to improve these, and we know that we have an issue in some areas with water quality. So all of the farmers got a visit from their ASSIP advisor, and they looked at the farms, printed out all of the maps and seen, well, where are the issues on your farm? And this is John Dunn's maps here. And you can see here, I don't know if you can see them very clearly, but these are where there's overland flow on his farm. So like if we have water that lands in this field, these are where it's going to flow down and into the river down along here. They're looking then to see, if there's an issue with phosphorus on these farms or if there's an issue with nitrogen. And these are all of the PIP maps that your advisors have access to them, either your ASSIP advisor or your local advisor, and they can tell you the exact same information as what we can see here. So then the farmers knew, well, what What measures can I implement on my farm that's going to reduce my impact on water quality? So if we go and we look at what actually has happened on farms, here's John Dunn, there's the river here. So we could see those overland flow areas, and he's gone and he's put in a riparian zone here, which is basically going to grow and it'll have rougher grasses in it. It'll collect any sediment, and the grass here will collect up nutrients that are going across the overland flow areas, and it'll stop it getting into getting into the water and reducing the quality. We have the same here along with Michael Biggins. He's fenced off the water here, and he's right on the edge of Loch Corrib, so it's massively important for him that water quality. He's not affecting the water quality there because it provides water into Galway. And then we have Michael McGuigan here on the Blackwater River, and he has fenced off the water course here. And the other thing that Michael has done is he actually planted a hedgerow. So all of this rough vegetation is going to collect any nutrients that's coming off the soil for now. But once this hedge is grown, it's going to provide an extra barrier. And they're now a part of the new Farming for Water EIP. And I'd urge everybody to talk to their local advisor and their ASP advisor to see what are the measures in that program that are available to you, because a lot of these measures are costed and you can get paid for them. From a biodiversity point of view and water quality, we like to have co-benefits, like, where we have measures on the farm that are protecting water, but are also advantageous from a biodiversity point of view. And this is again in John Dunn's, and we can see here it's a piece of ragwort that is being maintained on the farm, but you can see the caterpillars here and the cinnabar moth that is grown within that riparian strip. Here on Ken Gills, we have a lovely mature hedge grown up. On Kay O'Sullivan, she's fenced off this old relic hedgerow, and you can see where so that bank is now protected. And we're here on Olivia Hines, which is it's a nice new measure that was under acres. It's 0.25 hectares of an area that's planted with trees, and that's on the north side of the shed to capture ammonia. So again, we have co-benefits to the measures that farmers are taking on. We've Owlbox here in Michael McGuigan's, and Michael might need to send it up here to Newford. Newford have an owl on their farm. They have a lovely area here at the top of the farm where you have lovely whitethorn and blackthorn gorse growing along here on rock, and we have lovely old species-rich grassland, which we can see the cows and the calves are grazing here. And some of these areas might need, I suppose, a certain level of management, but they're only small areas on the farm, and they are massively important from biodiversity. We see a lovely area here along on James Skehan's where it's unsprayed up along by the edge of a woodland, and you can see all the bluebells and briars that are growing there that are providing forage for bees and cover for beetles and other wildlife. Lovely area here on Oliver O'Hara's in Leitrim, a wet area that has allowed, and you can see all of the different species that's grown here. And then we have these more systems where we've seen in acres where John Pringle has planted a line of native trees, and that'll do two things for him. It's increasing the biodiversity on his farm. It'll allow for carbon capture, but it's also going to provide in years to come shelter for his animals. The farmers are a part of the National Biodiversity Data Centre's pollinator monitoring program, and that's where Michelle Larkin goes around to their farms and is collecting data on what's happening on farms from bees and other insects, and he's doing counts on those. So we'll see where they're going over the next couple of years, and we'll be able to feed back as to what measures have worked. Labour, 50% of our farmers are part-time, and some farmers are have quite large units. So labour is very important, and they're putting very simple measures on their farms to be able to reduce down the time being spent in yards. So simple things, self-locking barriers on James Skeeton allows for if he needs to do any level of tagging, or for some farmers they're using them for AI. You can see here on Wesley Brown's a lovely creep feeder, and it's on wheels, so he can just collect it up to the Jeep and he can put it on. That was supposed to fly in, but Princeas Creedon, you can see here, he's after investing big money and he's after building a shed. He needed that anyway, but he's a really good handling facility here, which reduces down the length of time he needs to spend in the yard, but it's also massively positive from a safety point of view. You can see where he's able to step in there. He's separated from the animals and he's crushes along here. Princeas has calves, so he put in a very simple water mixer valve. So when he turns on the water, it's coming out at exactly the temperature that he requires. He's not having to mix hot water with cold water. And then if we look here, Ed Curtin has a very simple head scoop, and Olivia Hines, an automatic feeder here for her lambs. If she's any triplets, she's just able to put them in there and they're being fed with an automatic feeder. Very simple system here, a JFC meal bin. Animals, weanlings are being fed out here, 1 or 2 kilos. You're able to come up on a Saturday, put your meal into the bin and leave it there. Very simple system to get out and feed animals. And then we go back to what we seen earlier under the breeding side, a Sense Hub system set up here on McCarthy's. So I suppose our farmers are implementing all of these technologies on their farm, and I suppose the big thing for us is that we're able to get that technology out into the general public. Like, it's all fine we had the French and the Irish minister come and visit us here in Michael McGuigan's last year, but we really want to get this out to other farmers to see what our farmers are doing, how they're doing it, what it means from a financial point of view. Are the measures that they're implementing on their farms, is it working, and is it leading into extra money in their pockets? So there's a huge amount of information on these farms, and you're welcome to come and visit them. We have farm walks that are going on. You can see here, Getting Winter Ready farm walk on Ingus's Fatties was held this year on the 27th of September. We had a national farm walk on Shane and Gráinne Keaveney's in Roscommon on the 11th of September, and we have discussion groups coming in onto these farms all the time. We really want to get the messages that these farmers are doing a good job, what they're doing, how they're doing it. And you can talk to the farmer and say, well, listen, I did this, I made a mistake, and this is how I corrected it. So you're not starting off from scratch. We also have a website where we're putting updates, timely updates on these farmers. There's technical notes going up there. Some of the information from the farm walks is there. We have a newsletter that's going out to 7,000 farmers every month with all different information of what's happening on the farm. We have social media posts. We're in the Teagasc Daily, Today's Farms, and Farm and Media. So if you just Google Teagasc Future Beef, you'll be able to find all of that information for yourself.
That's all for this week, and you can catch up on all other recordings from the National Beef Conference and proceedings on the Teagasc website, and I'll include the link in the podcast text. You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates from our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan, and thanks for listening.